Live from Johannesburg, this is Fridays with Tim Modise. I'm Shahan Ramkisoon. If you're single like me, the show is for you. How do you approach someone? Are there ways to deal with the very real fear of rejection? And where's the best place to meet an open-minded person? We'll speak to a dating expert to help us get through the holiday dating blues. Then we'll make sure your body stays at least a little in shape these holidays. A fitness expert and dietitian are here to give us the best tips on how to eat and work out with as little effort as possible, I hope. And later, we'll help you impress your new love interests, which we, of course, helped you get with the first topic. The Saxon Hotel's wine expert tells us exactly which wine to pair with your Christmas lunch. You can call us on 011-759-6340 with your questions and comments. You can also tweet using the hashtag Fridays with Tim Modise. But first, here's your news headlines. Traffic picked up on all main routes today as South Africans head to their Christmas holiday destinations. The KwaZulu-Natal Transport Department has a new plan to limit car accidents. The province has so far recorded the highest number of deaths. Emergency personnel have also been dispatched to accident hotspots.
We are saying this coming weekend we want to make sure that we reduce by more than half of the crashes that we have recorded as compared to the previous weekends, because the weekends becomes very critical to us, especially the awkward hours of the evenings that where most accidents are occurring. But also there has been a deteriorating weather condition over the past weeks. We've seen now it has started some rainfalls, but we are hoping that it won't get bad as it has been over the past few weeks. But beyond that, we are calling on our people to drive cautiously. We are calling on our people to adhere to the law, to the latter.
Edcon's been thrown a lifeline. The Retail Giants Board has approved a proposed recapitalization plan. As a result, the company's lenders have extended waivers to allow time for its implementation. CEO Grant Patterson says they won't be closing shop, nor will they be cutting jobs.
We've managed to avoid a very large shrink in the number of stores. We'd either go out of business and we'd have lost all the stores, or we would have lost half the stores. So we've managed to avoid that. The business will slim down. It's actually been slimming down for the past year. We're probably down space over the past 2 years of 10%.
Former Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula is considering taking the Public Protector's report on review. Busisiwe Mkhwebane found he violated the Executive Ethics Code when a sporting goods company funded his family's holiday to Dubai in 2016. It was doing business with the Olympic Committee at the time. Mkhwebane says this resulted in a conflict of interest. Mbalula is denying any unethical conduct and says the Public Protector's findings are unsubstantiated. He says he took out a personal loan to fund the family trip from a friend who happens to be the sports director at Sedgars. And families of the Life Esidimeni survivors and victims will finally receive their compensation. In March, government was ordered to pay 1.2 million rand to the relatives of the mentally ill patients who died when they were moved to NGOs in 2016. Earlier this month, the group marched to Premier David Makura's office because they still hadn't received their payouts. The provincial government today reached an agreement with the group to process their claims.
As soon as claimants conclude the verification process with the Master of the High Court, we will start making payments. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, I think a few claims are already in the payment system, and they will start receiving their money within the next week. And the bulk, the rest of them will be paid in January, the period during which we expect that the Master of the High Court will have concluded most of the verification process.
All right, starting relationships, never mind maintaining them, is tough in the 21st century. Don't we all know about it? In the era of social media, stressful jobs, and sexual freedom, it's difficult to find the right partner. And if you do, how do you sustain relationships? For many, it's often a lonely life. So if you're single and yearning for that special person this Christmas, look no further than our studio guest, Paula Quincy. She's here to share her insights and tips on how to navigate the pitfalls of dating, love, and relationships. Thanks so much for your time, Paula. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's start with the basics. Why is it so difficult to actually find a partner?
I think it comes down to a number of reasons. One is expectations. Often we have this big shopping list of criteria that we expect someone to meet, and it's impossible for someone to meet everything on our shopping list. So we need to have realistic expectations. I also think, we live in a world of instant gratification when we want something and we want it now. So a lot of people are going online to find partners. We are also social creatures by nature, so we tend to move in the same circles and the same people, and we don't put ourselves out there to create new opportunities to meet new people in different environments. And also because, we like to stay in our comfort zones. So a lot of the time we will stay home and watch series or movies or Netflix, those kind of things. So it's around how and where are you going to try and find and meet new people.
So let's talk about the list that you mentioned, because we all have this list in our minds, a checklist. This person doesn't meet that criteria or the other criteria. Should we actually have lists, or should we downscale a bit and not be so optimistic?
I think it's about having realistic expectations. So I generally advise people to have their list of non-negotiables. What are your relationship deal breakers? Start with that, and then go to what I'm okay to negotiate or work around these things. And then when you go out there and you look to meet people, don't mentally go, yes, he's this, or she's that, she's that, she's that. You've got to give a person a chance. You've got to get to know that person, and you're not going to do it on the first coffee date as such. Also, a lot of people, particularly those that are going online, it's very safe to hide behind devices and platforms. We don't have to really be completely open and honest, so we play it safe sometimes. So when it comes to that list, how do you go through, these are my deal breakers, these are my non-negotiables, these are the things that I'm prepared to be open-minded to, and that I'm prepared to try or work around and experiment with.
So you say that you should give people another chance, not just make a decision on the first meeting. But everybody has this notion of love at first sight. You have this click, this feeling, you won't know. So you're saying that's not a reality. You need to actually meet a person to get to know them better.
Well, that love at first sight, a lot of it only happens in fairy tales or in the movies. It does happen, but majority of the time it's not instant. When we get into the first phase of relationships, it's generally a lust, attraction, and infatuation that comes into play before we start moving into the love phase, where we really start getting to know someone. In the beginning stages of a relationship, we're always on our best behavior. We're trying to impress, and that's unsustainable. We can only carry that facade for so long before our real self starts coming through.
Yeah.
And so, you may not feel that instant chemistry and attraction on the first date, but that doesn't mean that it can't grow or develop over time.
So what then about the mindset of South Africans? And I want to talk about South Africans because I feel that we're a bit conservative when it comes to dating, the experiences, and the different levels of relationships that you actually have in society now.
Very much so. South Africa is still very conservative, particularly from a generational perspective. Older generations are still much more conservative around things such as sexual identity, gender identity, even interracial relationships. Whereas the younger generations, the millennials, the Generation Zs, and even the up-and-coming centennials, they are being more fluid in their preferences, in their experimentation, in terms of self and their own identity, but also in terms of who they are attracted to and who they are having relationships with.
I was reading up, of course, and one of the things we've seen recently pop up a lot, it's obviously not new, but in South Africa it's popped up, pansexuality, where you're sexually attracted and romantically or emotionally attracted to somebody regardless of their sex or gender. How does that throw a spanner into the works in South Africa? Because given that we're so conservative already, this is something else.
Absolutely. People would probably relate to or identify more with the term bisexual, but a lot of pansexual people don't want to be labeled as bisexual because it's not about the sexual identity, are you male or female? It's about you, the person as a whole. and what I like about you and what I love about you as the person and your personality, not for your gender or your identity from a sexual perspective.
Yeah.
So it does blur the lines a lot, and it can, complicate relationships as such. But at the end of the day, it boils down to, are you okay with who you identify with? Because it's your life and you have to live it. And as long as you are okay with what it is that you're looking for in a relationship, and you can be completely open and honest with the other person to manage those dynamics, then it's entirely up to you as to what your choices and preferences are.
I guess the same would apply to open relationships, because in the 21st century, 2018 going into 2019, that's a thing. I lived in New York for 2 years, a couple years back, and that was so normal there. It was accepted by society. In South Africa, I don't know if that's the case.
No, it would still be very much sort of taboo or in the hush-hush, and South Africans are still struggling with the whole LGBTQI spectrum and getting to grips with what that is, not only from an individual perspective, but also from a organizational perspective. How do organizations cope and accommodate the different preferences and sexual identities? So it is going to create complexity in terms of how do we deal with or manage or interact with people that choose to be pansexual. And as more celebrities come out with that, so Miley Cyrus, for example, was one of the first that came out claiming she was pansexual, and some have followed in suit. So I think it will, over time, become more norm, and we will be more accepting and accommodating of it, but it's going to take time.
I know you've touched on pansexuality already, but for people who are tweeting us now saying we want to know more about this and exactly what it is, because let's be honest, some people might be finding themselves listening to what actually is out there and want to interpret what they're feeling. So tell us more about pansexuality.
So pansexuality is where I identify with you and I'm attracted to you as a whole, as a person, as your personality, not because you are male or female or because I am gay, transgender, any of those sort of sexual preferences. It's got nothing to do with sexuality or preferences. It's about what I'm attracted to you as a person, as a whole.
Yeah. And let's move on to meeting people in a public space, the fear of rejection. So we now know why we're not dating, and one of the reasons is because of rejection. You're afraid of being rejected. How do you actually approach that scenario and situation when you see someone you like at a bar or a restaurant?
So, I think it's about trying to find something that you can identify or relate with to use to start off a conversation. So, for example, if you see that this person has ordered a particular type of drink or beer, you could use that as a conversation starter. If you're standing in the Woolies queue and you see something in that person's shopping cart, you could go, oh, I've always wanted to try that bottle of wine, but I've been too scared to. Have you tried it? Is it your favorite? So how can you find something common to just kick off the conversation and then, kick into more questions around. People love talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So the more you ask questions about them, you start getting that conversation going.
But if they're not interested, they could be rude about it, not respond to you, give you a one-word answer, whatever. That's the fear, though, isn't it?
And I think, dating is like putting your CV out for a job. There are going to be no's, so how do you not take it personally in that it's not necessarily about you as the person? It could be that just that person is not in the frame of mind. Maybe they're not in the dating scene. Maybe they've just come out of a relationship. Maybe they are taking time out and they're focusing on their career or something like that. So don't take it personally. It's not about you specifically. It's just that you're not that person's cup of tea in that moment.
So what are no-no pickup lines? Because I had somebody say to me, I want to marry you. And I was like, not a chance. Just because it's such a stupid thing to say. What would you say are no-no pickup lines?
Yeah, definitely the cheesy ones, like, you must be tired because you've been running through my mind all night, things like that. I think nowadays in the modern world, particularly, there's a real need or sense of realness and being authentic and genuine and sincere. People are obsessed with reality TV shows and the lives of the Kardashians and stuff like that. People want to see the real you. So how can you just be yourself? First of all, being comfortable with who you are, what you stand for, and then being real with other people, being sincere and genuine and kind and respectful to others.
Yeah. You mentioned technology, and obviously there are dating apps now, so you don't really have to go and meet somebody. You can go on a dating app, match, and then message and meet eventually. Yeah. How does that work? I mean, how do you actually know whether you are attracted to someone just by chatting to them, just by looking at their picture and swiping right? I mean, there's a trick there to actually getting that right, isn't it?
Yeah, so it starts off with your profile. First of all, well, I think even a step before that, what is your intention of going onto these online dating apps? Because some of them are well known as hookups, and others are well known in terms of, this is where I found my partner, because you've heard other people talking about that they found true love online. So it's not impossible, but I think what is your intention of why are you going onto these sites? Then your profile, how real does your profile look? Is your profile short and sort of half finished? Do you have a picture or not? Face it, we are, as human beings, we are wired to identify with facial features and expressions and that. So put a photo of yourself that you're smiling, as opposed to, your face is turned to the side, so you can't see your full face. Artistic pics. And then, you don't need this long-winded resume, but it's also about how active are you on these sites. So if you're signing up to a site, putting your profile there and then hoping and expecting that all these, you're going to get all these hits and all these guys or girls falling all over your picture, that's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily going to happen. You need to engage. You need to be online. You need to be interacting. You need to be putting yourself out there, striking up conversations. You also need to know exactly what it is that you're looking for in a life partner or a potential partner in relationship, so that you know when it's not for you, that you don't end up following that and leading that person on or getting into a relationship that you don't really want to be in the first place.
Yeah. So let's talk about office parties, Christmas parties. Lots of people get tipsy, might make out with a colleague. They had a crush on this colleague for a long time. You do the same thing when it gets to New Year's as well. How do you handle situations like that? I mean, is it something you should even try, given the space that you're in, this professional environment?
Look, alcohol always gives people a bit of courage, in terms of how you're really feeling. Maybe you have had a crush, or maybe it's in that spur of the moment thing. If you are going to go down that road, you need to understand the consequences of both ways. That if this does hit off in terms of a relationship, what is the company policy around this? Some companies advocate that no personal relationships will happen within the work environment. I think today that's probably unrealistic. It happens more often than it used to. You need to maintain that professional relationship in the workplace and keep your personal stuff personal. So how do you put those boundaries down? How do you not take your stuff to work in terms of if you're having a fight and that, take it out on everybody in the office? So you've got to have boundaries. You've got to maintain a sense of professionalism. You've also got to understand the consequences of being in a relationship, especially if it is you're in the same department or there's a reporting line, a reporting structure, and potentially one of you may need to look at moving to different divisions or different departments or even the company altogether. Yeah,
it sounds like a lot of work. I'd rather just stay single. So we've met somebody online or in a bar. We're now on our first, second, third date. We have this thing going. When do you start labeling it a relationship? Because lots of people have a fear of labeling a relationship as well, which is why they're single.
Yes, absolutely. Fear of commitment or fear of being controlled or anything along those lines. I think it's when the two of you have that conversation around, are we being mutually exclusive or are we still dating others? And when that starts changing and you don't actually want to date other people, you want to be with this person, that tells you something about this and the nature of this relationship, and it's shifted to a next level, which is a more serious level and a more exclusive level, before you then want to go and put it on Facebook or social media that you're now in a relationship.
Yeah, it is always funny. The influence of outsiders in a relationship, though, is something that is a problem. We have friends who we seek, approval from when it comes to a relationship. Is that something that we need to change? Because many mature people would say, you're not dating the person, I am.
Yeah. Look, by nature, our family and our friends are our trusted source, and they are a support structure, and naturally part of us wants their approval. We want them to like our new partner. So I think it's okay for that. But when it starts interfering in your relationship and starts coming between the two of you, then those influences can have a negative impact on you and your relationship. So it's again about coming back to how do you put those boundaries down as to who is a positive influence and who is a negative influence in the relationship.
So many variables in this. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. We do appreciate it. Hopefully the next time I speak to you, it'll be a totally different conversation. That was a relationship expert, Paula Quincy. Now, coming up, it might be the holidays, but you, of course, still have to be healthy, or at least try. We're all trying. Still ahead, how to keep your waist from expanding these holidays.